Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today. On International Women's Day, we are here today to celebrate women and art. My name is Jess. I'm the Fair Director of the Other Art Fair's virtual editions launching this week. I've been at the Other Art Fair for 6 years and used to work on the London Fair. And women and art is a theme that's really important to the Other Art Fair and really close to my heart as well. So tonight we will be chatting to and seeing the work of 3 of our rising star women artists who are exhibiting at the virtual edition this week. Before I introduce them, I just want to highlight why it's still so important to discuss this topic. So although there has been progress over the last decade, there's still a long way to go for gender equality in the art world. So there's just a few points here to highlight this. Works by female artists still comprise a small share of major permanent collections in the US and Europe. In a recent survey of 26 major US museums, just 11% of acquisitions and 14% of exhibitions over the past 10 years were of work by female artists. At auctions, women's artworks sell for a significantly lower price compared with men's. The record for the most expensive work by a living woman artist at auction was set by Jenny Saville, whose painting sold for $12.4 million in 2018. And this sum is still dwarfed by the record for a living male artist, which is $91 million for a work sold by Jeff Koons in 2019. On average, women artists earn 74 cents for every dollar made by male artists in the US. And women make up a majority of professional art museum staff. But despite recent gains, they still remain underrepresented in leadership positions. So Women's History Month and International Women's Day is a great opportunity to celebrate women's achievements, raise awareness against bias, and take action for equality. At the Other Art Fair, we're really proud of our statistics in that across all of our fairs globally, we always have at least 50% women artists. In 2019, 56% of our artists globally exhibiting across the world at our fairs were women. In 2020, 60% of our artists who we featured online were women. We get on average between 600 to 1,000 applications for our fairs, and we have a different selection committee for each edition. And the way that our application and selection process works, I think this shows that without any of the traditional barriers of the art world or without any of the historical bias, gender equality is 100% achievable. So on Wednesday this week, we are launching our first ever virtual edition of the Other Art Fair. And this is a virtual reality art fair to promote real-time connections between artists and art lovers and art buyers. So I have a few preview images and a preview video of what it's going to look like here. 2020 was a really hard year for artists. So not being able to take part in any fairs, do any exhibitions or gallery shows, we had to postpone all of the other art fairs for the whole year. So from this experience, we have created the Other Art Fair virtual edition. And this is really everything that people know and love about the Other Art Fair, but online. So artists curate their own booth, exactly like our in-person fairs, and visitors can explore and navigate their way through the booths. They can watch videos of our artists, they can book a video chat with the artist as well. So if you want to talk to the artist directly and ask them any questions, you can schedule a video call just like this. We also have a series of lots of other programming, lots of which is relevant to Women's History Month. So we've partnered with Girls in Film who champion women filmmakers, and they'll be showcasing a series of short films. We have interactive digital art, we have curated collections. We've also partnered with Society 6, who are showing an exhibition of female illustrators in their booth. And we have lots of online workshops and live tours as well. So there's lots to discover at the fair. So ahead of the fair this week and for the talk this evening, I am delighted to introduce 3 incredible artists who will be exhibiting at the fair. These three artists have very different work, but they all speak to the portrayal of women, historical female figures, and feminism in some way. So we'll be chatting a bit about their practice, having a preview of their booth at the fair, and seeing some of their works. If anyone has any questions for our artists, we will have time for questions at the end, so please pop them in the chat and we can discuss them at the end. Firstly, I am delighted to introduce London-based artist Chloe McCarrick. Chloe has exhibited at the fair for a few years now, and she pretty much sells out her booth every time she does the fair. Her work is really unique, really beautiful. She works in photography, cyanotype, and gold leaf. So, Chloe, if you want to turn your camera and microphone on. Hi.
Hey.
So I thought that maybe you could start by introducing yourself, telling us a bit about you, and I will get your booth up so we can have a look.
Oh, okay, so I'm Chloe. I am a London-based photographer and mixed media printmaker. I mainly work in cyanotype, but to create the initial images to create the negatives for cyanotype, I use a lot of alternative process and other photographic forms of image making. All of my pieces are exposed to natural light using the earliest form of photographic process. And I always work on my handmade paper. So every single part of the process is all done using human touch. So it's just a really beautiful way for me to be able to produce my work.
Thank you. So I've got a preview of your booth here, and so this is the first time that anyone would have seen any of the booths in the fair, so very excited. Your work is really heavily inspired by female empowerment and strong females from history. Could you tell us a bit about these figures, and who are they, and where did you first discover and learn about these women?
So the women that I pick are people who kind of inspire me, who have touched my life or some part of me growing up, whether it's from when I was a child and my parents read certain books to me, right the way through education and then into teaching. And once you start learning about one woman, it then leads you on to a series of other women. So there's so many people to choose. I try and pick people initially who kind of touch that nerve with me, who make me so excited to learn more about them. And then it leads me on to learning about other people, and then I add more to the collections. So I've just finished doing a collection on women who discovered the universe. So it's basically women who are astronomers, astronauts, astrophysicists. I've also started doing a lot of 3D pieces as well, so I'm excited to have a little chat about those in the booth as well. So I've been working with different mediums. Because of lockdown, it's changed the way that I work. So it's been exciting to kind of develop my process in a completely new way.
Yeah, nice. So are there any pieces here that you would like to talk about or focus on that I can zoom into? Or who are some of the people on your booth and what works have you got here?
Yeah, so the centerpiece, that piece is inspired by Mary Shelley, author of Frankenstein, a fellow Londoner. She was born and raised quite close to where I'm based now. So I wanted to create a piece to pay homage to the things that were that she was interested in, things that inspired her, and the reasoning behind why she ended up writing the novel Frankenstein. So it was all to do with the scientific theories of the time. She went to a lot of doctors' talks and learnt about galvanism and reanimating corpses using electrical currents. And that's where she got the idea of reanimating Frankenstein's corpse using lightning. So I wanted to pay homage to science, basically. So we've got a Petri dish in the middle. So that piece, the Petri dish, I grew cultures inside a Petri dish. Then I put that inside the photographic enlarger and I printed it. And that's symbolic of the world. And it's also symbolic of the creation of life. And then her ring and her bracelet are made of microscopic cell structures from antique slides. And that also ties in with the idea of the life cycle and creating that life cycle in her creation of the monster.
Wow, that's amazing.
And then she has the fox's skull as a mask, because she was born and raised in London. The first animal that kind of springs to mind that embodies the spirit of London for me is a fox. So I illustrated the fox's skull to give her that kind of mask, and where the jawbone would attach, it creates that perfect eye socket. And then I've hand finished the piece with zinc that's been painted with different chemistry and heated, and the heat produces chemical reactions that changes the color of the zinc. So the whole thing kind of ties in with her initial ideas of the creation of her monster.
Wow. There's so much detail and there's such a story behind every piece. That's what I love about your work. It's not just depicting a portrait of someone. There's so much more to it.
Yeah, because I want to be able to tell the story and create that kind of narrative that then it promotes conversation and it starts that conversation. It enables people to become excited and then they want to learn more. And it's like it works on so many different levels. So when a person's looking at a piece, they start to question what all the pieces mean, and it's like putting a jigsaw together.
Yeah, definitely. What other messages do you hope to convey with your works?
So for me, it's all about being able to celebrate the achievements of these women, whether it be them being an incredible writer or an Olympic swimmer, or celebration of friendship. For me, I just want to be able to incorporate all of those different levels of not only the celebration, but also the theories and the history behind the pieces to just excite people so that then they want to learn more. And then if they purchase a piece and they have it on their wall, then it starts conversations in their homes as well. And then the message kind of continues. So it's all about kind of spreading that celebration, but also creating its own stories in itself.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
So you mentioned that you've got some 3D pieces which are new. Do you want to tell us a bit about these?
Yeah, so they're on the wall on the left, the larger ones. So the first one is inspired by Margaret Fontaine. So she was a Victorian lepidopterist. She was born in Norfolk, and she ended up traveling the world through, well, for her entire life, discovering and collecting butterfly specimens. So she had a huge range of all different specimens that she catalogued. So she was one of the original kind of scientists and natural studier of natural history. So I wanted to create a piece that paid homage to her life's work, because most people that know her will have read her memoirs, and she was a bit of a rebellious, feisty lady who was known for her ferocious trail of leaving lovers behind. So I wanted to create a piece that kind of paid tribute to all the elements that she should have been celebrated for in her life's work.
Yeah, amazing.
So because I have a large collection of butterflies myself, I photographed all of the different specimens that I had, and then friends gave me other pieces. And when I was exhibiting in Paris last year, I actually went to the famous taxidermy shop and collected more.
Wow.
So I could add them to the collection. So I photograph each individual butterfly, and then some of them I put inside the photographic enlarger, and then I print them, create the negatives, then print each piece separately as cyanotypes, cut all the pieces out, and then put all the pieces together to create the overall story.
Wow, so all of those individual butterflies are from your own collection that you've photographed? That's incredible.
Because I just want to be able to use things that excite me and inspire me, and I've always had a fascination for natural history, science. So blending all of the things that I love together, and being able to kind of use the objects that I have in my personal collection just seemed a really fitting kind of tribute to creating these stories of these amazing women.
And for those that don't know what cyanotype is, could you just explain a bit about how the process works?
Yeah, so the process is the earliest form of light sensitive printing. It's a process that was first used by a British botanist called Anna Atkins. So for me to be able to use a process pioneered by a woman to create this whole collection of incredible female figures just seemed a really fitting tribute. And to be able to do them all using Mother Nature. So it's capturing the essence of Mother Nature, it's capturing time, it's capturing space, it's capturing weather, all of the elements. It's just a really, really beautiful, fitting process that creates that whole cycle.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's 100% non-toxic as well. And because I hand make all of my own paper, I have a certain element of control of always producing the rich hues of the blue that I like, but you have to give certain elements of control to Mother Nature. So it's kind of it's very much a give and take.
It feels a very like wholesome, balanced kind of process.
Yeah. And the fact that in winter, it's much more difficult for me to be able to produce larger volumes of work. So to be able to work using the more 3D collage pieces, I'd already created lots of the different sections previously. So then during the winter months when the weather isn't so great, I can then sit down and actually do the really intricate work of cutting and positioning all of the pieces.
How long would something like this, how long do your pieces usually take to make?
They can take up to 2 to 5 months, dependent on the size and also dependent on how many pieces, and also dependent on the weather. So just making the paper can take a good few weeks because of where we live. It's not so hot, so it takes longer for the paper to dry. Then to expose, I can expose for up to a month, dependent on how great the weather is. Whereas when I was in LA and I did some workshops out there, it was taking 10 minutes to expose one piece, which is incredible. I've never, ever exposed a piece that quickly here before.
You have to be somewhere like LA and then you can...
Yeah, I have to go for half the year to LA in the winter months. I could do that.
Well, we are kind of out of time for talking about your work, but we have time for questions at the end, so I'll bring you back at the end.
Okay.
So thank you so much. Just lastly, before we leave, I just wanted to ask you, aside from the women in your artworks, who inspires you and your life and your practice?
Oh my gosh, there's so many people. All of my peers in the art world, all of my friends, the way that they strive to achieve, the way that as women, it has been really difficult. Like when I grew up in the 80s, it's totally different to how life is now. And watching people kind of club together and collaborate is a really beautiful kind of inspirational way of, I don't know, of working. And it's just, yeah, people in general just inspire me. It's that connection that I feel with other people. And that's what I found so difficult with lockdown, because you're not getting that same kind of face-to-face connection.
Yeah.
You have to kind of reach out more digitally. And I have made a lot more friends and connections that way, but I can't wait to get back to doing the fairs and bouncing ideas and excitement off my peers.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it's not
the life fairs.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. And yeah, we'll speak to you again at the end.
Thank you.
So second up, I'm excited to introduce Variety Brown. Variety is a portrait painter from London, and she's exhibited at the Other Art Fair in London and also in LA. And she's recognisable for her black and white portraits of famous figures from history. So I will just get her booth up, and Variety, if you want to come on.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So I thought, again, if we could start by kind of just introducing yourself and telling us about you and your work, and I will bring up your booth.
Cool. So I'm Gracie Brown. So I do black and white portraiture. My work started more towards civil rights activists, but I'm starting to branch out into sort of musicians and other entertainment industries. But civil rights is kind of where it started. To be honest, I did start mainly with male figures, but then I started to branch into more female figures as time's gone on.
Thank you. So here we've got a preview of your booth at the fair. And so at the fair, you're showing your Black Icon series. I just wanted to ask, how important is it to you to shine a light on these figures from history? And can you tell us a bit about the women that you portray in these portraits?
Yeah, so I think it's important for everyone, but also for myself, because I think I've always known about the people I paint, but I think like you only sort of know the basics. So having painted them, I've sort of researched into them more. So I've also sort of educated myself more. So it's been a good journey. So with the first female I painted was Angela Davis. So that's to the right, in the corner. So that was the first female I painted. And so she's an activist. So she was a civil rights activist, and I think she's actually the only icon that's still living that I've painted. But she's also a feminist as well. So with her, I think I was drawn to her, like her boldness and her sort of intellect during the civil rights movement. And then the second, I think, was Nina Simone, was the second I painted, and I think she's probably been the most favorite piece of mine from people. And I think what was great about Nina Simone is because she was a civil rights activist, but a musician as well, and I love music myself, so it was nice to have two sort of like passions there. And then Mamie Till is on the end. So Mamie Till is the mother of Emmett Till. So that was that. So when he was murdered, like just before the civil rights movement. So he and her kind of helped kick off the civil rights movement. That story. So that was definitely quite a moving story. And it's funny because I wanted to sort of share Emmett's story, but then I didn't want to really paint him. So, but because of how she sort of handled the death of her son, I thought that was very inspiring.
Yeah.
So out of all of them, I think she's probably the biggest inspiration, because I just can't imagine how you could sort of carry on after that. So that was a very touching piece for me. And I think Billie Holiday is the most recent female painted. And once again, because I love music, that was enjoyable. And yes, she just definitely had a rough experience in America as well during that era. So they've all sort of had, tough lives.
Yeah, so your pieces are kind of educational. It's a person's history and about their story, and teaching other people about these figures from history. And another thing as well is, I think one thing I like about my work is that it's also, I like to kind of, even though it's a lot about the history, but I also like, I think because women are very beautiful, it's quite nice to paint women. So like, it's sort of like a beauty shot as well. So I kind of like to sort of highlight them in their best light as well, if that makes sense. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I think you can see that I read that you're inspired by black and white photography, and you can kind of, you see that in the pieces.
Yeah.
How has photography influenced your work as well?
Yes, I've always loved like photography myself as well, but I really think black and white, I think it's funny because you could have like a normal colored picture, but if you make it black and white, it just sort of changes the whole mood. So I think I like the mood of it, and I think it's like very timeless as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I like about it. And then just the bold, it adds to the boldness as well.
Yeah, I was going to say the contrast in your pieces, they make them really powerful, the figure.
Thank you.
How did you first get into painting?
So I'd say I always liked art in school. I actually, to be honest, I was more of a drawer. And then I did a project in college, painting sort of like facial features. And then actually a friend of mine saw, and she wanted a portrait painted of her. So I started sort of doing portraits for friends, and then I started getting commissions, and then I kind of just carried on from there.
Wow, impressive. And you already spoke a little bit about your love of music. And I've seen at your booth at the fair, you often have some sound playing in the pieces.
Yeah.
And you've got some sound here so that when someone's looking at the piece, they can play and there'll be some audio, whether that's music or kind of someone speaking.
Yeah.
What do you like about bringing kind of sound and art together?
I think it adds another like dimension, and I think it's because like obviously music is art as well, so it kind of just, I feel like it really enhances the experience. And I think especially with because everyone I paint is from the past, it's kind of like a flashback, kind of like going back in time kind of vibe. So I think it just helps you also connect with the person as well.
Yeah. Definitely. So I mean, when the fair is open, I recommend everyone comes and has a look and a listen to because it's so interesting and these pieces are so beautiful. So as I asked Chloe, I just wanted to ask you as well, aside from the women in your artworks, who inspires you?
So it's hard. I wouldn't say anyone in particular, but I think like, especially when it comes to women, I think because we're quite like emotional and we go through quite a lot, I think I admire like overcoming things. So if like anyone that's gone through something difficult or something in the public eye, they've had to deal with scrutiny or something, I think overcoming that is very inspiring. And I think it's like sort of that feeling, if they can do it, you can do it too, if you ever have to deal with anything in your life. So that's what inspires me, I think.
Oh, amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
So as I said, thank you so much for joining us, and I'll bring you back on for any questions at the end.
Oh, thank you.
And last but definitely not least, I am delighted to introduce Delphine Lebourgeois. Delphine is a French artist who is based here in London in the UK, and she first exhibited at the Other Art Fair, I think around 7 years ago, and she's collaborated with The New Yorker, The Guardian, Amnesty International and Soho House. So let's bring up her work, and Delphine, if you're there, I can bring you on.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Jess.
Thanks for joining us. So I'll just bring up your stand, and again, if you would like to start by introducing yourself and your work.
So my name is Delphine Lebourgeois, and I'm a French artist based in London. I work mainly with drawing, but I also do limited edition prints which are created digitally. And I did the very first, I've been doing the Other Art Fair for many years, and I was present at the very first one in 2011 on the South Bank in the Oxo Tower. So that was a very long time ago.
And so women feature quite heavily in your work as well.
Yeah.
From superheroes to armies of women to witches, and often you have a different series of work that will look at a different theme. So I was just wondering if you can tell us about these series and these women, and who are they and where do you get your inspiration from?
Yeah, that really varies. I think I've been drawing almost exclusively women for the past 10 years. I work on 1 or 2 series a year, And the themes are really depends on what's happening in the world, how I feel personally, if I'm going through something personally, and what I read as well. So it's really intuitive. There's no rules to it. And yeah, one of my latest series is witches. I also did one during the lockdown titled Bright New World, and I'm also showing that. I'm showing the two at the fair this week.
Oh, great. So you said your recent series is witches.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a bit about this, and what is it about the figure of the witch that interests you?
Okay, so I started thinking about that back in the summer in 2019. Yes, I was reading a lot of feminist books at the time, and I stumbled across a book by Mona Chollet. It's a French book. It's called Sorcières, la puissance invaincue des femmes, which means witches, the unconquered power of women. And it's a very interesting essay. Basically, she looks at women's condition from the Renaissance, where most of the execution and the burning happened, right up to our contemporary world. And she looks at three categories of women: the single women, the women who don't have any children, and the elderly women. And she realizes that, in fact, the stigma of on these women is still very current nowadays. And I think that gave me, that book really gave me the energy and the desire to do something about witches, because the figure of the witch for me is really the ultimate rebel. It's a woman who's not scared of speaking out, of being herself, of escaping patriarchal society. So yeah, that's why. And it's also a figure that's been borrowed quite a lot by popular culture, so it's visually also quite interesting. There's a lot to play with, so
definitely
that was it.
And what was this piece here?
Okay, so that's probably one of the most symbolic of the lot. So this is called Wicked. And it's a humorous middle finger to the society who doesn't accept the witch in the first place. I did a couple of original on the same theme, and for the print, because that's a limited edition print, I wanted something different. And I couldn't settle on a face for that woman. I didn't know if she was supposed to be an historical witch, so, you know, or a contemporary one. And I think she had like 4 or 5 faces. I couldn't decide. And at the end, I chose for her to have a shaven head. Yeah. And tattooed as well. And probably because there was a little bit of a punk attitude there, which I quite liked. But also I realized as well, it echoed something else which I'd read about a few days before. Basically, at the end of World War II, the women in France, the women that were known to have had affairs with German soldiers, they were dragged to public squares and their head were shaven off in public. So that was a real walk of shame for these women, and a witch hunt as well, because a lot of the accusations were a little bit, you know, not always accurate and everything. So I think in that image, there's this extra layer, which I found interesting.
Yeah, I love her. I love how she's lighting her cigarette with the fire.
Yeah, definitely not caring.
And how would you say you portray female empowerment in your pieces?
Probably that's a difficult one, but probably by making positive images. I mean, it hasn't always been the case. I have done some quite dark images a few years ago, but they were making me quite miserable. So I think now each time I make an image, I try to find the positivity. It's like an antidote. Rather than repeating or re-exploring what hurts, I try to find something to cure it within an image. You know, I'm not curing anything, but I'm just something that makes me feel better, really. So that's how I work.
And I think you can quite easily see the women in your prints and drawings are strong women who don't care what people
I think yes, I think that gives me courage to draw women like that.
So what was the other series you said you're showing at the fair in the booth?
So, yes, I'm sharing another series called Bright New World, and that was creating during lockdown. So it's not so, there isn't the same kind of feminist element, although all my work is probably with a strong underlying feminism, but it's different thing. But I wanted to say something about another image called the Wild Inner Woman, which I think it's on the right wall. Yeah, it's a very small one. That's it. That's the one. That's the one. I wanted to talk about that one because it's quite an important one for me. It's basically, while I was reading the book by Mona Chollet, I was also reading a book called King Kong Theory by Virginie Despentes. I mean, Virginie Despentes, she's a feminist writer, French feminist writer, and King Kong Theory is a feminist essay she's written in 1996, and I really recommend everyone to read it. It's absolutely brilliant, it's thought-provoking, it's visionary. And amongst other things in this book, she gives a personal interpretation of the King Kong character. And for her, King Kong is not a monstrous primate, but it's the wild side that every woman has in her. So at the end, the woman must decide if she stays in the jungle with King Kong or if she returns, and if she returns to a patriarchal society with her love interest. And in the story, she chooses to go back, and at the end, the society kills King Kong and the wild side, her wild side as well. And I thought this interpretation was just really brilliant. Mm. So this image is a bit of a nod, a very humble nod to Virginie Despentes. So I swapped the hand of King Kong by the hand of a witch. Yeah, and because for me the witch is the same. It's a white side that inhabits every woman.
Yeah, and so this is a drawing, is it? An original?
It's a drawing. It's an original drawing, and yeah, it's only small. It's 25 by 35.
I love it. And how do you? Is it paint that you painted the color?
It's a mixture. I use watercolor, ink, and a little bit of acrylic as well.
Oh, that's amazing.
Thank you.
You have another series that I love, which is your pink collection as well.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, the pink collection, that's a fun one. I don't really know what to say about that one because there's no real grand design behind it. I think there's a time where one of my friends said, oh, you should do erotic drawings because there seemed to be like an erotic tone in everything that you do. So I said, oh yeah, why not? I'll try. And I ended up doing quite a few of those, and they're quite fun to make actually. Basically, they're about women's fantasy. So there's a lot of cartoon characters in it. It's lots of things happening.
Yeah,
it's quite fun to do.
Yeah, they're a great one. Are there any other pieces on your booth that you would like to tell us about?
Well, we could talk about the fear one. I haven't got much to say about it, but it's fear is, yeah, that one, yes. I think I was inspired by Georgia O'Keeffe, who said that she'd been scared all her life, but that never stopped her doing things.
Yeah.
And I think we're living quite a scary time at the moment with the pandemic and everything else. So that drawing was, again, probably to give me courage and to empower. So yeah.
So it depicts a woman who
is on a on a cliff and who jumps. She's got a racket and she's playing tennis and she's going to jump into the void basically, but she doesn't care.
And she's not scared.
No.
Amazing.
No.
Oh, and what's this one made from?
Oh, that's just ink on Chinese rice paper. So it's very thin paper, very fragile. I really like to use fragile paper when I draw. I just like that quality. Not just ink, yeah.
Amazing.
Pigment ink.
Thank you so much for showing us and telling us about your work. I think there's such interesting stories behind the women in your work.
Thank you very much.
Again, I would like to ask you, aside from the women in your works, who inspires you in your practice?
Women writer really inspire me, because that's something I can't do. Write is not something, and and also maybe women who work on a large scale, because everything I do is quite small. So there's this French artist called Prune Nourri. I don't know if you've heard of her, but she is a sculptor, and she makes this really big sculpture of you know, women or things, and she talks a lot about intimacy. So it's like intimacy on a large scale. So that really impresses me.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, all of you. If Chloe and Variety, if you want to kind of jump back on, and I'll see if we had any questions. Okay, so Chloe, question for you here. So you have limited editions, or do you repeat? Are they limited edition, or do you repeat paintings, or repeat your?
So I use the same characters to produce different versions of the work. I'll only ever use the negative 10 times, but I can't do an addition because of how I create the work. So each piece is an original, unique creation. And for me, there's so many women that I want to be able to create the pieces about, that it just seems silly to keep repeating the same person. And I'm always so excited to learn more about different people and different characters. Being a self-confessed bookworm, I'm always wanting to kind of go and tell the story of someone else. And because of how I create the pieces outside and everything is handmade, it's very difficult to create a set. So I do a lot of limited edition screen print works, but they're always done. I'll only ever produce around 10 to 15 of them. Maybe I just get bored of repetition. I like to always be kind of using my hands and creating new pieces and developing the way that I produce my work.
And like you said, there are so many women out there that you could portray that have done something in history or in science or in nature. So it's nice.
There's a lot of people that haven't had the recognition. So for me, I want to be able to put them forward and give these women a voice. And it's really exciting for me to be able to do that.
Thank you. And the question here for Variety. So you mentioned that you started off portraying more male figures and gradually began painting more women. Was that just naturally, organically, or was it because you were drawn to specific female icons?
Yeah, I think because I started with the civil rights, I think I was sort of doing sort of like Malcolm X, and then I think with Angela, I think I was looking into the Black Panther Party, and because she was briefly involved, and that's sort of where I learned more about her. So I think I was kind of drawn in, but also I definitely did get people asking as well, sort of they wanted to see female figures. So I'd say it was a bit of both.
Thanks. And is there a specific, another question for you, is there a specific icon you go back to often, or do you try and paint different people all the time?
I try and paint different people all the time, but sometimes, because I've had a few commissions where I think sort of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, because they're quite popular figures, I've painted them a couple times, but I do try to paint as many as I can, and I paint quite slow as well, so I feel like I'm always having to try and get as much done as I can. So yeah.
How long will it take you to create a painting from start to finish?
So I've got a lot quicker than I used to, but sometimes, and because I do go back and forth quite a lot, I sort of rotate. So some of them I would like start one day and I'll finish it like a year later, but I would have had a lot of breaks in between. But I'd say it's not as long anymore. So definitely on and off for quite a few months. Yeah.
Wow, thanks. Nice. And a question for you, Delphine. You cover so many amazing topics. What has been your most favourite or interesting theme?
I don't know, probably the one that I work on at the time, at the moment, you know, when I'm working on it, because it's like an energy and I need to create it. So at the moment I'm working on hysteria and the teenage girl. So that's quite fun. That's quite fun. But yeah, no, everything related to women is quite, yeah.
Yeah. And a question for all of you. So as an artist, how has the pandemic affected you? Do you feel more creative and inspired or less?
It's a hard one.
Yes. To go first, Chloe?
I'll go first. I've really enjoyed working in a completely different way, having to think outside the box, and I'm really, really excited to kind of develop these 3D pieces and create larger scale versions, something I've never done before on that level. So I'm working on a 1.2 meter diameter piece that's going to be multi-layered. So I've just been working with my framing team on how to frame it as well. So it's basically, yeah, it's given me more of a kind of excitement to go off on a tangent. So
you're in a slightly different direction, which you may not have done if it was not for the lockdown pandemic.
Yeah, because I've always worked in collage. Obviously, we're doing all of my different layering techniques to create the negative to begin with, but then to be able to then do it again and be deconstructing and reconstructing constantly, it's, yeah, I just really enjoy it.
Thanks. For Variety, how have you found the pandemic?
To be honest, I definitely miss in person. And I think with my work, I don't know, I think it's a lot better to see it in person and also sort of get, obviously it's nice having like virtual comments and stuff, but I like having like conversations and stuff about my work in person. So I miss that, but I agree with the like sort of thinking, it makes you think outside of the box more. And I think because the world is becoming more virtual anyway, I think it's sort of like a nudge to just sort of move with the times and like kind of start, you know, working online more.
Yeah. Thanks. Delphine?
Yeah, I think at the beginning I was a bit shell-shocked. I don't think I had any inspiration whatsoever. I think for 2 months I couldn't think straight. But then after I had the feeling I needed to speak about, I mean, to do something about the pandemic and about what we were going through. And now I just don't want to hear about it anymore. So I'm kind of moving on to other things, I think.
Yeah.
But in terms of inspiration, yeah, apart from the beginning, which was really tough, I don't think it's really affected it.
Good, good. And then we've got one last question here for you, Delphine. Do you have any other book recommendations that have inspired your work? I'll have to write down all of your book recommendations.
Yeah. So apart from these two, no, I can't think of any other ones. There's lots of articles I'm reading at the moment, lots of articles on hysteria. I read a lot in French, I'm sorry, because I'm not sure if these books are translated, but there's a book by a lady called Mass, who is called Le Bal des Folles, and that's about hysteria as well. So yeah, but Virginie Despentes, all her books are really good, and some of them are translated, so I really recommend her. Definitely.
Thank you very much. And we have a question from someone: when can we purchase these pieces? So the Other Art Fair Virtual Editions is launching on Wednesday. We have 3 preview days on Wednesday, Thursday and Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday the whole fair will be open for people to attend. So for A Small World, you can register via A Small World and their events page, and you'll get your invitations to come along, and all of the works are available for sale in the virtual editions. You can book a video chat with our artists, as I said at the beginning. So if you want to ask any more questions, you can book a one-to-one chat with the artist via their booth or on the Other Art Fair's website page. And yes, that is everything. I think that's all of the questions. I'll just check if there are any others. Yeah, right. Well, thank you everyone so much. I hope you enjoyed this evening. Happy International Women's Day. And I look forward to seeing you at the virtual editions, and I hope you enjoy coming to our first ever virtual fair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.